What happens when one of music's most legendary icons meets television's most notorious host in a clash that nobody saw coming? You won't believe what unfolds when Cher sits down with Stephen Colbert, and what starts as casual conversation quickly spirals into the most explosive confrontation late-night television has ever witnessed. The shocking moment that sent social media into absolute chaos and left an entire studio audience stunned into silence. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of The Late Show started innocently enough, with Cher settling into the guest chair wearing her signature flowing outfit, ready to promote her latest Broadway venture. The atmosphere seemed warm as Colbert delivered his opening pleasantries. But seasoned viewers of this channel know that when Stephen Colbert gets that particular glint in his eye, trouble is brewing just beneath the surface. The first sign something was off came when Colbert abruptly shifted from discussing Cher's career achievements to making pointed comments about her political activism. "So Cher," he began with that trademark smirk, "you've been quite vocal about your political opinions lately. Some might say perhaps too vocal for someone in the entertainment business." Cher's expression immediately hardened. You could see her posture stiffen as she leaned back in her chair. "Excuse me?" she responded, her voice carrying that unmistakable edge that fans know means business. "Are you seriously suggesting I don't have the right to speak my mind as an American citizen?" But Colbert wasn't backing down. Instead, he doubled down with what can only be described as calculated provocation. "Well, when someone with your platform starts making statements about complex political issues, don't you think there's a responsibility to be more informed?" The way he emphasized that last word sent a visible chill through the studio. The tension in the room became palpable as Cher's famous temper began to surface. "Informed, Stephen? I've been fighting for causes longer than you've been on television. I was advocating for LGBTQ+ rights when it was career suicide to do so. I was speaking out against injustice when it actually mattered, not just when it was trendy." What happened next was the moment that would define the entire confrontation. Colbert, with what seemed like deliberate condescension, chuckled and shook his head. "But Cher, don't you think your fans tune in to hear you sing, not to hear your political dissertations? Maybe stick to what you know best." The studio fell dead silent. Even the cameramen seemed to sense they were capturing television history in the making. Cher's eyes flashed with a fury that could have melted steel as she processed what had just been said to her. "Stick to what I know best?" she repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The legendary performer then unleashed decades of pent-up frustration with dismissive attitudes toward celebrity activism. "Let me tell you something, Stephen. While you've been sitting behind this desk making jokes, I've been using my voice to actually make a difference. I've raised millions for AIDS research. I've fought for veterans' rights. I've stood up for women and minorities when nobody else would." But Colbert seemed determined to push every button possible. "And I admire that. I really do," he said with mock sincerity that fooled absolutely nobody. "But when you tweet things like calling politicians names and making dramatic statements, doesn't that just contribute to the toxicity in our political discourse?" That was the breaking point. Cher's voice rose to a level that commanded attention from every corner of the Ed Sullivan Theater. "Toxicity? You want to talk about toxicity? What's toxic is people like you who think entertainers should just shut up and dance while the world burns around them. What's toxic is this attitude that because I'm a performer, my opinions somehow matter less than yours." The confrontation reached fever pitch as Colbert made what would prove to be his fatal mistake. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he said, "Look, Cher, I'm just saying that maybe leave the serious political commentary to the professionals and stick to entertaining people. That's what you're good at." The collective gasp from the audience was audible. Even Colbert's own production team seemed shocked by the blatant disrespect. Cher stood up so abruptly that her chair nearly toppled over. The camera zoomed in to capture every nuance of her expression as she towered over the host's desk. "Professionals?" she said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her legendary status. "Stephen, I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've won an Academy Award, a Grammy, an Emmy, and a Tony. I've survived every trend, every criticism, every attempt to diminish my voice. And you think you can sit there and tell me to stay in my lane? The energy in the studio was electric, as Cher continued her devastating response. You know what the real problem is? It's people like you who think that just because you have a late-night show, you get to decide whose voice matters. Well, let me tell you something. My voice has been mattering long before you were even born, and it'll matter long after you're forgotten. Colbert, perhaps realizing he had pushed too far, attempted to backtrack. Now wait a minute. I didn't mean to suggest, but Cher cut him off with a gesture that silenced him completely. No, you know exactly what you meant. And I know exactly what this is about. This is about trying to make me look foolish. Trying to diminish my credibility because you think it makes for good television. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You've succeeded in showing everyone exactly who you really are. The moment that would be replayed millions of times across social media was about to unfold. Cher began removing her microphone with deliberate precision, her movements sharp and purposeful. I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with fans, to have a conversation. But what I got instead was a lecture from someone who thinks celebrity activism is just a punchline. Colbert made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Cher, please, let's just nothing, she interrupted, now completely untethered from any pretense of politeness. I've spent my entire career being told what I should and shouldn't do, what I should and shouldn't say, who I should and shouldn't be. And I'm done. I'm done with people like you who think you can use your platform to belittle others. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as one of entertainment's biggest icons gathered her belongings. The cameras captured every second as she turned to face Colbert one final time. You know what's really sad, Stephen? You had the chance to have a real conversation with someone who's actually lived through history, who's actually made a difference. Instead, you chose to be small. With that devastating final blow, Cher walked off the set with the kind of dignity and power that only true legends possess. The cameras followed her exit as she strode past shocked crew members, leaving behind a host who sat speechless at his desk, and an audience that had just witnessed late-night television history. The sound of the studio door closing behind her echoed through the theater like a gunshot, leaving everyone to process what they had just experienced. Stephen Colbert was left sitting alone at his desk, the weight of his actions finally seeming to register as the full magnitude of what had just transpired began to sink in.